Okay, well, this story is about the time that the closest I ever came to actually dying um, on the airplane, the C-141, during Desert Shield and Desert Storm. Actually, the entire time, 5 years and 8 months that I was flying on it, this was the closest I ever came to actually biting the big one. And it actually happens in flight. We were flying over the Pacific. I'm trying to remember. I don't remember where we were flying to Japan or the Philippines, where it was we were en route to. But we were en route, and we had some passengers on the plane and full of cargo. And we were headed out into the Pacific. And we were flying along. Now, every once in a while, I would take a stroll through the back of the airplane, and there's a reason for that. After uh, after the U.S. Federal Aviation Administration stopped smoking on all airplanes, um, we as crew members on the in the military were also told that we could no longer smoke on the airplanes, and so some would go and take a walk. If there were passengers up front, there'd be tons of cargo in between. So these big pallets of cargo and stuff, and the passengers in the front couldn't see all the way into the back of the airplane. So oftentimes you would see crew members kind of walking down the sides of the plane heading for the back. And they would go sit down at the back, and what we called the pressure door at the back had a seal at the bottom, and they would sit back there at the pressure door and smoke their cigarettes, and all the smoke would go out the pressure door at the back there, and take them some water and a little bit of crackers or something, and wipe their hands and their face and eat a few crackers, and then head back up front, and nobody would be the wiser. Well, I'm not saying that's what I was doing, but on those trips, a lot of times when you're walking back and forth down the plane, you would take a look out the little windows, and it wasn't like a commercial airliner. There wasn't a window every foot along the side of the plane. There'd be a few little porthole windows up and down different spots along the side. Well, it was a good thing to do as you're walking by. We would, look out and look at the wings, and, make sure everything looked okay. And I just happened to be walking down the side, and I took a look out the left side of the airplane, and I saw what we call a blowout door. Now, let me bring up a picture of this 141 here, and kind of, it's a good picture, kind of give you a picture of the scale, the size of it. Um, but on the left wing out here, on each of the wings, there's actually what we call these blowout doors. And it's a little door, maybe, 5 inches or so, 4 inches or so in diameter, that was on, different spots along the bottom of the wing. And the door would actually open outward, but it was spring loaded. So when you popped a little lock on, you push the button, and a little lock would pop, and the door would spring open. And so, but when you're going in flight, and it would spring, the spring was on the front, the hinge was on the front, so it would open up, the hinge on the front, so it would open up towards the front of the plane. But we're in flight, at 37,000 feet, hauling butt. And so the door should have stayed closed in the slipstream, the wind hitting it. The little door should have stayed closed, even if the button had been pushed to unlock it. Well, when I glanced out, this door was sitting open. And I'm like, well, that's unusual. So I called the flight engineer I got on the headset, and I called up to the flight engineer, and I said, hey, I see a blowout door open on the left wing. And so the flight engineer said, well, I'll come down and take a look. So a few minutes, flight engineer comes down, and we go back and we look out. I said, it's, out here. And he looks out, and he said, I don't see it. I looked out there, and sure enough, it was closed. It wasn't open anymore. And I said, well, I swear I saw a blowout door. And he said, well, keep an eye out and let me know if you see it again. I said, okay. So he goes back up. A little while later, I go down there. Now I'm a little more vigilant. So a little while later, I go back down there and I look out, and sure as shit, that blowout door is open again. So I called the flight engineer. I'm like, hey man, that blowout door is open again. He goes, all right. So he comes down. He looks out. The door's closed. It's not open by the time he gets down there. I'm like, I swear to God, I'm not trying to make you crazy. The door was open. I know what I'm seeing. And so he's like, all right, well, keep an eye on it again. Let me know. So he goes back up to the cockpit. A little while later, I go back down. Sure as crap, that door's open again. I call him, like, door's open. So he comes down, he looks, sure, and he sees it this time. Door's open. So he goes back up, and we start discussing it um, more. And turns out what had happened was, um, well, I won't say this. We go ahead. We proceed on to our location. We land on the ground, and we tell the maintenance guys, the crew chiefs on the ground, hey man, there was a blowout door open in flight. So crew chiefs go up there and they open up some panels and they stick their head up in there and look around. And let me explain how the wing works. And the wing of the airplane, if you're looking at it, I don't know if I've got another picture over here. Let me see if I can find one to better describe it. Uh, let's see what this looks like. Come on, open up here. Let me just see if I can zoom in here a little bit. Okay, here's a shot of the wing. Now, the blowout door is open back here on the back side on the bottom of the wing. Now, in this front, what we call the leading edge of the wing up here, there is a tube that runs all the way down the front. That tube has a bunch of holes in it. And hot air from the engine is directed down that tube. And what it's for is for wing anti-ice. So when you're at altitude and your wings start to ice up, or you get in an icing condition where ice will actually start to build up on the wing, and that can be really bad. So what happens is when ice starts to build up on the wing, the pilot will reach up and turn on what we call the wing anti-ice. And when he does that, hot air is directed down that tube that's just on the inside of that wing. And there's all these little holes, and hot air blows onto that wing from the inside and heats up and melts the ice off the wing. So the ice can't build up. And so what had happened, the maintenance guys told us, is that that tube had blown out. So instead of the air being focused right on the front of that wing, that tube had blown open, and uh, air was getting down inside the wing in here where it wasn't supposed to be. Now, there are fuel tanks inside this wing, and those fuel tanks are laminated, they're sealed in there, but there are gaps in there, and there's a ton of wiring and wiring harnesses that run inside of this wing as well. So what had happened is when that tube blew out, hot air was not being directed into the front of the wing. It was being allowed to leak into the inner parts of the wing, which that's what the pressure was every time the pilot up there would turn on the wing anti-ice. Air was blowing down into the thing, and the blowout door was opened up because air was rushing out that hole. Well, the problem was, and every time the engineer would come down, for some reason the pilot had just happened to turn off the wing anti-ice, and the door from the air blowing would close up and look normal. But the engineers or the maintenance guys on the ground told us, they said, you were about 60 seconds from a wing off light. And what we mean by a wing off light was the light from the explosion as the wing blows up and blows off the airplane. And so what had happened, that hot air that was supposed to be just on the leading edge of the wing was escaping into innards of the wing, and there's wiring harnesses in there. They said that wiring harness was literally melting together. So it was literally about to short everything out. And also the fuel tanks had started to delaminate in there. So there was fuel leaking into areas of the wing where there should not have been fuel leaking into. And coupled with the wiring harnesses starting to melt from it, was they said we were probably, if they had left, if the pilot had left the wing on ice on for another 30 to 60 seconds, that we would have probably gotten a wing off light at 37,000 feet over the Pacific Ocean, and they would have probably never known what happened to us. So that was, so I was within probably a minute or so of, biting it on that flight, and that was the closest I ever came to dying. Now, as a follow up to that, I had a crew get really angry with me a few months later. We were on a flight. We were going up to the Arctic Circle. I forget, Greenland, up in Greenland somewhere, and to pick up a bunch of Navy guys and bring them back. And it was supposed to just be an overnight flight. We just packed for, 1 or 2 nights. We were supposed to just fly up there, spend the night, pick up these guys, and come back home to Southern California. We were stationed at Norton, and we flew up there. And so we landed, went to the hotel. The next day we come out, and I notice when I get off the bus, I notice a big ladder standing up there, and there was a maintenance guy up in the front of the wing working on under the wing here. He had a ladder up there, and he was standing up in, and he literally was reaching up inside the wing and had this rag and was pulling this rag out. And I went up and asked him, I said, "What's going on?" And he said, "Oh, we got a fuel leak inside the wing, and I'm just drying it out." And I'm like, whoa, 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 wait a minute. We got a fuel leak inside the wing. Now, remember, I just almost had this wing off flight from fuel and everything a few months prior. And so he's like, yeah, yeah, it's okay. And the rest of the crew, they were like, yeah, yeah, we'll be fine. We're not going to turn on any wing, any ice or anything, like that. We'll be fine. I'm like, we're in the Arctic Circle. The chances of that are you can't say that. I don't care if you're in the Arctic Circle or you're over Guam when it's 140 degrees at 37,000 feet. It's damn cold. So there was no way you could say that. So, and as part of an air crew like that, if one crew member, I don't care who they are, they can be the lowest ranking crew member on there, they can be a private, an E1, but they're a member of that crew. And I don't care if they've got a general flying as the aircraft commander. If one member of that crew feels unsafe, he can call it and say, we're not flying. This is unsafe. And I made that call. And I said, I am not getting on that airplane and flying this and back in this airplane that is an unsafe. You've got leaking fuel inside of the wing. I'm not doing it. The rest of the crew was pretty mad. They wanted to go home. And I didn't care. I'm sorry. So we wound up staying there. They literally, because it wasn't a main Air Force base we were at, they had to fly maintenance crews out of Germany to fix the airplane. So they had to fly some guys up from Germany to do the repairs on the plane. Well, then we had to fly those guys home to Germany. So and then when we got to Germany, they said, "Oh, while you're here, we want you to go ahead and fly these missions around out in the Atlantic out there." So um, all over Europe. So what was supposed to be go out, spend the night, come back the next day, turned into about 2 weeks trip for us abroad when we weren't really prepared for it. So needless to say, the rest of the crew wasn't very happy with me on that one, but we all made it home and all made it home safe. And that was the most important thing to me. So that was the time that I almost got the closest I ever came to biting it while flying on the 141. Y'all have a great day.